Do you ever watch the world around us and wonder what is going on? I mean, you ever turn on the news and you see some of the headlines and you start to begin to maybe just have a little bit of fear or anxiety, maybe some uncertainty about the future. If you do, you wouldn't be alone in that. There's a comic that I've seen, and there's a guy sitting there watching the news, and he's saying to his wife, "I only watch the History Channel. Their news is less depressing because I know we already survived it." You ever feel like that? Forget thinking about the future. What about today? You got any challenges today? Things that you're facing that have got you worried? Just anxiety is spinning up in your mind a little bit. Maybe it's a personal challenge or something within a relationship or family, something happening at work. It's financial hardships. You've got something going on with one of your friends. And you came to watch us online here, and yet these things are rolling around in your mind, and you're wondering, what is God doing? Where is He? Did God forget about me? Does God not care about me? Is God even at work? If you've ever been there, or maybe you're there now, I think this story in the book of Numbers that we're going to look at next will serve, I hope, as an encouragement to you. We're going to tackle a story that takes place over about 3 chapters, from Numbers 22 to Numbers 25. And I got to tell you right at the beginning, as we go through this story, there's a character in this story that I don't quite know what to do with. His name is Balaam. Now, if you're familiar with this story, maybe you know where we're going here. But Balaam is a guy who, apparently he's available for hire to go out and cast curses and blessings upon people, kind of a hired gun, if you will. You can pay him to do this. And he must have been a well-known individual. Right? He must have been successful a little bit in what he did because people sought out his services. And I'll tell you, as I read through this story, I'm not sure if Balaam is one of the good guys or if he's one of the bad guys. Is he a hero in this story? Or is he a villain? And I wrestled with this as I was studying. I said, I just got to tell you right up front, I'm not sure what to make of it. Now, big picture, whenever it comes to Balaam, he definitely doesn't seem to be one of the good guys. Later on in the book of Numbers, the Israelites, they'll kill Balaam, in part because of his actions he took against them in a different story, some evil influence that he had. In 2 Peter, further down in your Bible, Balaam is referred to as loving the wages of wickedness. So he definitely doesn't end up as a good guy. But there's other things in today's story that actually seem fairly positive. Maybe he's just a good guy gone bad. Now, we're first introduced to Balaam in Numbers chapter 22. And Israel, let me set the scene for you here a little bit. Israel has just got done defeating some of the mighty armies on their way to the Promised Land. And God has given them victory, and now they're on the doorstep of another battle. And here's where we'll pick up the story. Let me read verse 1 of Numbers chapter 22. The Israelites traveled on and camped in the plains of Moab near the Jordan across from Jericho. Now Balak, that's different from Balaam, okay? Now Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was terrified of the people because they were numerous, and Moab dreaded the Israelites. So the Moabites said to the elders of Midian, "This horde will devour everything around us like an ox eats up the green plants in the field." Since Balak was Moab's king at that time, he sent messengers to Balaam. Balak said to him, "Look, a people has come out of Egypt. They cover the surface of the land, and they are living right across from me. Please come and put a curse on the people for me, because they are more powerful than I am. I may be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land, for I know that those you bless are blessed, and those you curse are cursed." Okay, what's happening here? Balak, he's the king of Moab. He knows what's been happening to Israel's enemies lately, and he sees Israel camping out across the plain there. And remember, we're talking millions of people, so they're numerous, they're vast, they're spread everywhere. And he's scared for his kingdom. He's scared for his people. He fears defeat, and he has every reason to be afraid. He knows that God is on their side. He's heard the things that are happening, and he sees them just over there. They're his new neighbors. Neighbors can make all the difference in the world, and I don't know where you are. I don't know if you've got good neighbors, bad neighbors. Maybe you've had a little bit of both over the years. But Balak's not fond of his neighbors, so he comes up with a plan. He says, I'm going to hire this guy named Balaam. I've heard of him. I'm going to hire Balaam to cast curses on the Israelites. So Balak sends a group of delegates to Balaam to try to do just that. Let's pick up the story again now, verse 7. The elders of Moab and Midian departed with fees for divination in hand. They came to Balaam and reported Balak's words to him. He said to them, spend the night here, and I will give you the answer the Lord tells me. So the officials of Moab stayed with Balaam. Then God said to Balaam and asked, who are these men with you? Balaam replied to God, Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent this message to me. Look, a people has come out of Egypt, and they cover the surface of the land. Now come and put a curse on them for me. I may be able to fight against them and drive them away. Then God said to Balaam, you are not to go with them. You are not to curse this people, for they are blessed. So Balaam got up the next morning and said to Balak's officials, go back to your land, because the Lord has refused to let me go with you. Now, it's these few verses where you kind of see an example of what I'm talking about, this uncertainty that I have with what Balaam is up to. On one hand, he says, look, I've got to go ask God if it's something I should do. And he tells them, based on God's response, that he isn't going to go. Right? That seems fairly positive. But on the other hand, he is, after all, entertaining their question. He's thinking about it. And he doesn't go, but he doesn't go not because it's not the right thing to do. He doesn't go because he kind of puts the blame on God, if you will. God is refusing to let me go. When I was growing up, there was an amusement park near our house that we would go to. And the amusement park had this one particular ride. It was kind of a dark ride. I don't know if, it was this building, and you sat in this little moving vehicle that just moved all throughout the building, and the lights were kind of low. That's why they called it a dark ride. And it was a ride. It wasn't a haunted house, but it kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't a haunted house, but yet it still kind of was about maybe spirits and being haunted and that kind of thing. But we weren't allowed to go on that ride. As kids, we didn't really deal in that kind of thing. But if any of my friends would ever ask me if I was going to go on that ride, I wouldn't have said to them, I don't want to go on that ride because I don't think it's the right thing to do. I would have said, oh, my parent, I'd go with you, but my parents aren't going to let me go. That's kind of what Balaam is doing here. And notice that Balaam didn't tell God everything those guys said, right? As if God wasn't going to be aware, but he doesn't tell them everything. He just tells them a little bit. So I'm just confused on what Balaam is doing here. Anyway, the delegation heads back and tells Balak that Balaam's not going to come. Now, Balak, again, because of his fear of what he sees out there, he's not satisfied with that. So this time he sends a higher-ranking group of people back with more money, more promises of wealth and riches, and he tells them, go ask Balaam again. So they go out with more money, more riches, more promises of wealth, and they ask Balaam again. Here's how Balaam responds to being asked a second time. Now I'm in verse 18. But Balaam responded to the servants of Balak, if Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go against the command of the Lord my God to do anything small or great. Please, stay here overnight as the others did, so that I may find out what else the Lord has to tell me. So again, there's positives and negatives here, right? Positive. This sounds pretty good. He's not going to go. He's saying no matter how much money you offer me, I can't go against what God says. It can't be bought. At least that's what he seems to be saying. But on the other hand, he's like, you know what? Stay here. Stay one more night. Let me ask God one more time. Why does he need to ask God one more time? I mean, this question has been asked and answered, hasn't it? Maybe Balaam thinks God's going to change his mind. Maybe he's a little bit like a politician here. He's trying to play both sides. But here's what happens next. That evening, verse 20, God came to Balaam at night and said to him, since these men have come to summon you, get up and go with them. But you must only do what I tell you. When he got up in the morning, Balaam saddled his donkey and went with the officials of Moab. But God was incensed that Balaam was going. Wait a second. What? What? God tells Balaam, okay, you can go with them, but only do what I tell you. But then it says in the very next verse, God was incensed. He was angry that Balaam was going. All right, I'm a little confused. And now, this reminded me of that ride that I was talking to you about just a moment ago at the amusement park. Every time we would go to the amusement park, I would ask my dad, can we go check out that ride? And he would say, no, we're not gonna ride it. Okay. As a kid, I didn't know that I saw the harm in it. I said, why can't we go ride the ride? And my dad would say, no, we're not going to ride it. Finally, one time, we were headed somewhere, I don't remember where in the park, and we went often enough, and I must have been old enough that I kind of knew my way around a little bit, and I asked my dad, can I go check it out? And my dad said, sure, you can go check it out. So I went to the ride, wow, he's going to let me check this out. And I got on the ride, and I rode it. And I come out, and I'm going back to meet my family where they are, and I can remember seeing my family coming towards me, and it was obvious that they were a little displeased. And I got to them, and they were like, where have you been? What in the world have you been doing? And I said, I went to check the ride out. And in their minds, in my dad's mind, it was a miscommunication, because for him to check the ride out meant I was just going to go to where the ride was and just look at it, I guess is what he was thinking. In my mind, when I said I was going to check the ride out, I was actually going to go check it out. I was going to go and ride. And there was a miscommunication, and it felt a little bit like this story. Like, you told me I could go, now why are you unhappy that I went? It seems like that's what's happening here with Balaam. God just told Balaam that he could go. So what's wrong here? Well, what I think is happening is that Balaam isn't giving Balak and the Moabite delegation the whole story. Did you notice this? Now, I don't think God is upset because Balaam went. I think God is upset because of Balaam's motive, his intention, what it is he's trying to do. Did you notice that in both responses that Balaam gave back to the delegation, neither time did he tell the delegates he wouldn't be able to do what was asked of him. All he told them is that God said he couldn't go. He didn't communicate to them, listen, I can't curse them. Why not? Well, maybe he thinks God is going to change his mind. Maybe he's trying to gain a little more reward from the king. He's kind of acting as if he's a free agent, as if he's going to be able to do what he wants, that he's able to control his own future, and he can control the future of other nations as well. He doesn't seem to be being very transparent. But what does God often do when we think that we're in control? He shows us that we're not. And he does that with Balaam in a most fascinating way. Here's what happens next. They're traveling now. God was incensed that Balaam was going, and the angel of the Lord took his stand on the path to oppose him. Balaam was riding his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing on the path with a drawn sword in his hand, he turned off the path and went into the field. So Balaam hit her to return her to the path. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a narrow passage between the vineyards with a stone wall on either side. The donkey saw the angel of the Lord and pressed herself against the wall, squeezing Balaam's foot against it, so he hit her once again. The angel of the Lord went ahead and stood in a narrow place where there was no room to turn to the right or the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she crouched down under Balaam, so he became furious, and he beat the donkey with his stick. So picture this. Balaam is traveling here. He's got the delegation with him. They're heading back. Everything's going fine, but suddenly this donkey that Balaam is riding won't do what it's supposed to do. Now, I've not ridden a lot of horses. Maybe you have. Maybe you can relate to what Balaam is experiencing here. Now, we know why the donkey won't do it, right? The donkey can see literally the angel of the Lord. Now, the angel of the Lord here, that's a manifestation of the presence of the Lord himself. The donkey can see the angel of the Lord standing in the way. It must be terrified. No one else sees the angel at this point in time. And so here's this guy, Balaam, who the king went to great lengths and cost to hire. Supposedly he's able to cast curses on whole nations. And suddenly he can't even make his donkey move or go where he wants it to go. That must have been frustrating for Balaam. It it must have been even a little bit embarrassing. And maybe everybody else is kind of watching him do this to the donkey, and they're kind of like, this is the guy that's supposed to save us. This is the guy that we're hiring. He can't even get his donkey to do what he wants. And then the most incredible thing happens. The donkey talks. Watch what happens, verse 28. Then the Lord opened the donkey's mouth, and she asked Balaam, what have I done to you, that you have beaten me these 3 times? And Balaam answered the donkey, you made me look like a fool. If I had a sword in my hand, I'd kill you now. But the donkey said, am I not the donkey you've ridden all your life until today? Have I ever treated you this way before? No, he replied. I tried to imagine what this must have been like. Yeah, we've got a dog. His name is Otis. And there are times like we picked up Otis from like a doggy daycare not too long ago. We had been out of town. We went to pick Otis up, and you kind of expected him to get into the car and just start talking about what had happened during his week. Was it exciting? Did he enjoy where it was that he was staying? And then, of course, you realize, no, he's not going to talk to me. But that's not what happens here. The donkey turns around and has a conversation, begins to talk to Balaam. And what really stands out to me is that Balaam talks back. And there's no indication here that Balaam is in any way fazed by this. He just seems to have a normal conversation with his donkey. I mean, what would I do if my dog started talking to me? I don't think I would just have a normal conversation back. I mean, would you? But then Balaam is able to see what the donkey could see. Verse 31. Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the path with a drawn sword in his hand. Balaam knelt low and bowed in worship on his face. The angel of the Lord asked him, why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Look, I came out to oppose you because I consider what you were doing to be evil. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. If she had not turned away from me, I would have killed you by now and let her live. Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned, for I did not know that you were standing in the path to confront me. And now, if it is evil in your sight, I will go back. Then the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but you are to say only what I tell you. So Balaam went with Balak's officials. Now, in the following verses, Balaam continues on, and he meets Balak. Balak asked him what took so long, and Balaam says, look, I've come to you, but I must only speak what God gives me to speak. Balaam now gives him more of the whole story. And so they head to the top of a mountain that overlooks the plains, and they can see part of the people, though not all of them, but they can see part of them out there. And the place that they go to is associated with Baal. It's one of the gods that the Moabs worshipped. And here's what happens. Balaam said to Balak, build me 7 altars here and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me. So Balak did as Balaam directed, and they offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Balaam said to Balak, stay here by your burnt offering while I'm gone. Maybe the Lord will meet with me. I will tell you whatever he reveals to me. So he went to a barren hill. God met with him, and Balaam said to him, I have arranged 7 altars and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Then the Lord put a message on Balaam's mouth and said, return to Balak and say what I tell you. Now, why 7 altars? There doesn't seem to be a biblical precedent for this. This is probably just associated with some pagan rituals that Balaam had done before. But he returns and he offers to Balak what God gave him to say. But it's not a curse, it's a blessing instead, which of course gets a predictable reaction from Balak. That's not what he was hiring Balaam to do. And in verses 7 through 10, Balaam doesn't curse the Israelites, he actually gives them a blessing. And after the blessing, it leads to this exchange. What have you done to me? Balak asked Balaam. I brought you to curse my enemies, but look, you have only blessed them. And he answered, shouldn't I say exactly what the Lord puts in my mouth? Now, this scene where they'll move to a new place, they build the 7 altars, they do the 7 sacrifices. Balak says, go curse them, and Balaam returns with a blessing instead. This scene happens 2 more times. It happens a total of 3 times. Each time, the blessing gets stronger, and each time, Balak gets more angry. We pick it up now in verse 10 of chapter 24. Then Balak becomes furious with Balaam. He struck his hands together and said to him, I summoned you to put a curse on my enemies, but instead you have blessed them 3 times. Now go to your home. I said I would reward you richly, but look, the Lord has denied you a reward. Balaam answered Balak, "Didn't I previously tell the messengers you sent me? If Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go against the Lord's command to do anything good or bad of my own will. I will say whatever the Lord says. Now I am going back to my people. But first, let me warn you what these people will do to your people in the future." So Balaam fesses up a little bit. He reminds Balak, "Hey, I told you at the very beginning, I'm only going to be able to say what God gives me to say," which is true, except what he left out the first time was that God had told him, "I'm not going to let you curse the nation of Israel." But nonetheless, Balaam then goes on to prophesy to Balak about the destruction that's coming for him and coming for the Moabites. And it ends with these two guys up on the mountain overlooking the nation of Israel, parting ways, and they each go their own direction. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are on Balaam. And overall, you could probably say that this is a pretty positive story about him. I mean, sure, there's some bumps in the road, there's some questionable things, but overall, maybe it's not too bad. But when you combine that with what we know about him in the future, what's coming for him, and some of the evil influence he has on Israel, I don't think that this is somebody we should be patterning our lives after. Like I said in the beginning, maybe there's just a lesson here about a good guy that's gone bad. But setting Balaam to the side for a minute, what do we have going on here? Why is this story, as fascinating as it is, why is it in Scripture? What is there to learn? Well, you remember the questions that we asked at the beginning about the state of the world around us, what the news is telling us, what we maybe are thinking about towards the future, or maybe even just things that we're worrying about now. And we're asking ourselves, what is God doing? Well, I think there are three truths in this story that help us when we try to navigate those thoughts. Here's truth number one. God can't be stopped. I want you to remember that. God cannot be stopped. He always keeps his promises. What do we know about the situation Israel was in? God has promised to bless them. God had promised to make them into a great nation. God had promised to lead them to the promised land and give them the promised land. And despite everything that they had been through thus far, God is still holding true to his word. And Israel is now up against a king who wanted to see them defeated. He wanted to see them destroyed. They're up against a king who, maybe if they had had a news station in their day, they'd turned on the news and seen the headline scroll across the screen, local king Balak hiring Balaam to curse the Israelites, and maybe they would be sitting there panicking at that, right? They're going up against a guy who's going to great lengths to hire somebody in to come in and curse them. And yet God takes what this king meant for evil, a curse, and turn it into good, a blessing. Despite the best attempts of these men, God continues to keep his promises. God can't be stopped. Take heart in that. When you watch the news, or maybe you're experiencing turmoil just in your own life, in your family, your relationships, your work, the things we've mentioned already, remember that God always keeps his promises. And no one, not a nation, not a political leader, not a king, not a group of people can keep God from doing what he wants to do. God can't be stopped. There's a second truth we see in this story that I think helps us today, and that is God can use anyone he chooses, whether good or bad, to accomplish his purposes. All right, think about it. Two guys get together to form a team, Balaam and Balak. One guy is known for his curses. The other guy is an evil king who represents an entire nation. And these guys probably aren't on the cover of, Goody Two Shoes Monthly, right? I mean, even if you want to argue that Balaam, at least in this story, is one of the good guys, they aren't a dynamic superhero duo here, setting out to fight the bad guys. This isn't the first version of Batman and Robin, if you will. Balak was a bad guy. And yet what did God do? Right? Did he throw his hands up and say, "Oh, now my plan is ruined. I could go up against anybody, but I can't use Balak. I can't do what I want now." There goes that idea, right? Is that what God said? No, of course not. God can use anyone, anytime, anywhere to do his will. to do what he has purposed to do. Boy, that should give us some strength. God can't be stopped, and he can use anyone that he chooses to use to accomplish what he wants to do. And the third truth that we see in this story is that God is always working, whether you know it or not. Think about this from Balaam's perspective when he's riding that donkey. Right? Balaam has a goal in mind. I'm going to ride this donkey to meet Balak the king, but the donkey isn't cooperating, and Balaam has no idea, at least at first, why the donkey isn't doing what he wants it to do. He assumes he can just whip the animal and the animal will obey. Balaam has no idea that God is the one that's actually working behind the scenes to keep Balaam from getting where he wants to be. Now, don't misunderstand me here. I'm not saying that every time your car breaks down, for example. I'm not saying that every time that happens, that's God somehow working behind the scenes to accomplish something. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that I think there are a multitude of times in our lives, seemingly random, ordinary events that happen to us that is God working behind the scenes to accomplish what it is that he wants to accomplish. And in this story, at the right time, God revealed to Balaam what he was doing. Sometimes we know about God working too, but sometimes, maybe even most of the time, we don't have any idea that those things are going on. And you know who else didn't have any idea that this was going on? You know who really doesn't play a major role in this story? Israel. They don't play a major role in this story at all, even though they are kind of in the center of it. There's one group trying to curse them, and God is working to protect them. In fact, every indication in Scripture here is that while they're down there in that valley, they have no idea that any of this is happening. They have no idea that all of this is taking place up there on the mountaintop, that there's a king plotting their destruction, going to great lengths to bring his plan to fruition, and they are simply clueless on this. They don't know that God is using what was meant to harm them as a blessing. They don't know that God is keeping his promises to them in mighty ways, using a guy like Balaam and his donkey to do it. They don't have a clue. The same can be true of us. God is always working, and we might be aware of it. But even more likely, we have no idea of all the things that he is doing for us. And if he wasn't doing those things, how different things might be. So remember these three truths as you face the week. God cannot be stopped. He always keeps his promises. And God can use anyone that he chooses to see fit, whether good or bad. And God is always working, whether we know it or not. And sometimes the way God works, it doesn't always make sense. Sometimes God does it different than we would like for it to be done. Sometimes it's hard. But when we begin to wonder, when we begin to question, to ask why, ground yourself in the truth of those three things. Remember what the future holds and the promises that God has made to his followers. I'll be praying for you as you navigate the week ahead. Sometimes the news or situations that we find ourselves in leave us wondering, what is going on? Has God forgotten about me? Does God care? Is he even working? When you find yourself asking that question, remember those three things. In the meantime, I'll be praying for you as you do so and as you seek to be deployed into the community around you, showing God's love to others in the same way that he has shown love to you. God bless you. We'll see you next week. Panama Baptist Church, you are deployed.